Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Chris the Comp, although you may have known me as referee or Mr. Official throughout the years. Joining me today is Mario Nasta for part 1 of a 3-part series on assistant refereeing. This is ARing 101, the abbreviated version, which is just an overview of the general rules ARs and beaters need to understand as they play on the pitch. If you'd like more analysis, anecdotes, and analogies, I would refer you to ARing 111, the extended cut, where Mario and I get into more discussion and deep dives about the applications of these rules. Let's dive in. So this is basically the crash course in assistant reffing, or as Mario here has called it, beat reffing, because really most assistant refs are tasked with watching beaters and the beats that they make. Mario, thank you for joining me. Thanks for sharing this with the world.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Chris.
So the first section here seems to be about the rules.
Yeah, so I wanted to break this up into 2 sections. The first one is more informational, kind of explanatory of overall beating rules for the beater game, anything interacting kind of with the bludgers, just to make sure everybody's on the same page with kind of discussing. I know for myself, right, I've been guilty of taking the AR test or the head ref test, what have you, without actually reading the whole rule book in the past, because maybe I was certified in the previous one and I just kind of skimmed through. Maybe I thought I knew all the changes and things like that. So you might get to the game and not actually know all the rules. I think it's important to, at least once during the season, really, before you get to any major tournament, brush up and make sure we're all on the same page with what the rules are.
First rule to go over here is being knocked out. What does that mean?
Yeah, so anytime a player is hit by a bludger, a live bludger specifically, they're knocked out. And that can hit you in the hair, in the broom, in the clothing, or, just hits you, right? You're knocked out. As long as you're a chaser, keeper, or seeker, that knockout occurs as soon as the ball strikes you, right? As soon as you're hit, you are officially knocked out. On the flip side, in the beater game, because beaters are allowed to try and catch dodgeballs that hit them, they are considered struck the moment the ball hits you, and then are beat or knocked out as soon as that live bludger becomes dead, whether by being caught by someone else or by hitting the ground, right? The only difference between a struck beater and a knocked out player in any other position is a struck beater is allowed to try and catch that dodgeball that has struck them, right? They are only allowed to do that and only allowed to kind of move in any way that would allow them to do that, right? They're also only allowed to hit the ball in a way that would make it easier to catch, right? If you're struck on the shoulder, you can't then slap the ball somewhere else. And we'll go into that a little bit more in depth later, but that's the basics of being struck or being knocked out. Similarly, if for some reason your broom ever comes out from between your legs, same is applied. You are considered knocked out.
And then I like your little note down here about the penalty for ignoring being knocked out.
Yeah, so big highlight, and I think it hasn't always been this case in some of the previous iterations of the rules. You are beat upon being hit by the bludger or upon bringing your broom out, not when the ref calls it out, right? The impetus is on the player and the action as soon as it's occurred, right? Even in situations where you're actually struck by a player on your own team, you should be taking your broom out, like, unless you know for a fact it happened. Correct procedure is to take the broom out, and then when a ref calls you safe, they should tell you to put it back in and continue play, right?
Right.
Anytime a player is going, oh, well, I know it hit me, but the ref didn't call it, that's completely illegal and should be rewarded with a swift yellow card.
All right, the next rule we're covering is, what is a live bludger and why should I be afraid of it?
Yeah, so as we were talking about in the previous rule, you can only actually be beat by a live bludger, right? And a bludger becomes live when a beater intentionally propels it, right? And that's important because sometimes you just run around the field, ball's bouncing by, you bump into it, you send it flying somewhere. That's not a live bludger. There has to be intent behind it, right? It can be propelled by any part of my body, whether it's a kick or if I'm trying to be fancy, I throw it up in the air and headbutt it at you. All that counts. It just has to be some kind of intentionality behind it, propelling the bludger, right? And from there, if you are a player, that live bludger can only beat you if it's being made live by the other team, right? If Team B propels the bludger towards, their own Team B player by accident, whether it's because they got in the way of a throw or they're colorblind like me and didn't realize the person was on their own team, right? They accidentally hit them. you're not beat. It doesn't matter if the ball's live. It can only beat you if it's from the other team. The propelling needs to happen. The ball needs to be out of your hand before it comes in contact with anything for it to be considered live, right? So if, let's say, beater on team A is being face guarded by beater on team B because they don't have a ball, right? They're just trying to get in the way. They want to get bludger control back for the team, and they're kind of in your face. You start your throw-in motion, and they slap that ball out of your hand before it leaves your hand naturally. It is not a live bludger. This is something that kind of gets missed a lot, I think, in the beater game. It doesn't matter if you started a throwing motion with it. It has to have left your hand. It has to have been propelled out, away from your body solely by yourself and while not contacting anyone else. If it was in contact with someone else, it's not a live bludger.
Right, not the NFL forward pass rule, but it has to actually leave your hand.
Correct. And then along those same lines, right, so like that gets often with the tap beats, right? The player puts the ball out and just has it kind of resting on someone and drops it. That's not a beat. Just because it left your hands does not make it a live ball. If it was already contacting that person, it is not a legal tap beat, right? You have to actually let it release from your hand before it comes in contact with the other player. And then on the penalty side, again, I try to put the penalties in here with each slide to just kind of quickly give people a note, right? Blue card for intentionally contacting an opponent with a held bludger. So that's those situations where, you know, maybe you're up in someone's face, a chaser's face, like faking at it. If you choose to then actually like hit them with it while it's still in your hand, just actually tap them with it, like not talking like punch them with it or anything. Clearly that's dangerous play. We're going yellow or red at that point. But if you're just tapping someone, right, to try and make them think they're beat, that is illegal. You should be getting a blue card for that. Accidentally doing it, on the other hand, right, you're doing it back and forth and they like turn in a way that it actually nudges you and you're like, oh, my bad. That's going to be a back to hoops if you think it affected play to the point where that player actually had to dismount and go back.
Now next is unknowingly knocked out. So what happens if one of those live bludgers, you know, let's say it's cold out, I'm wearing 8 layers, it just barely skims my shoulder, I don't feel it.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to happen, right? At the end of the day, we are playing contact sport. There are 4 balls moving around at all times. There are going to be times where you can't feel it, whether it's because, to your point, it hits a little bit of clothing, or maybe you feel it and you're in the middle of a tackle and you just literally think it was somebody making contact with you or something like that, right? There are times where it cannot be reasonably expected, and the reasonably is important here, for a player to know they were beat, right? In those circumstances, it is the AR, or as I like to call them, the beat ref's job to make it clear they were beat, right? Whether that's by yelling, whether that's by running actually over to the situation and pointing at them, making it clear, like, you need to make them understand they were beat, right? There are times, right, I've reffed games for hearing impaired individuals, right? Maybe they're hard of hearing in one ear, so it's a little tough to kind of get the message across. Do what you can, like wave, run to the other side of them, scream, like whatever you can to make it as clear as possible to do, right? At a certain point, right, it becomes like you've done everything you can, and if they're still playing, even if it's good intention, you need to stop playing and give a card, which in this case would be like that blue card. Do everything you can up until that point. Really try to make it so that you can get them to understand they were beat without it having to affect play. Because as soon as it's actually starting to affect play, we do need to stop it. We do need to execute that blue card so that we can continue that fairness of the game.
Right, and as a ref, the onus isn't entirely on you, but you should make every effort to let them know before they get the chance to affect play.
100%. And then I just wanted to note again on the penalty here, right? The only reason you should be giving that yellow card for a player playing after beat, it's not whether or not it affected play, it's whether or not you think they willfully ignored the call.
The knockout procedure. Okay, I get hit by one of these scary live bludgers. What do I gotta do?
So, this is very important. I'm gonna go through this step by step. First thing you do when you get hit, right, is fully dismount. First thing you do on your beat, you need to dismount, right? All right. That means the broom needs to come completely out from within your legs, right? It has to break that plane, has to be out of there. Okay. Second thing you're going to do, go back to hoops on your own team and tag in. I did make these rules, this PowerPoint specifically for USQ, not for MLQ, but if you're an MLQ, you're going to tag in at the middle hoop. For everyone else playing Quidditch, tag in on any one of the hoops, either the pole or the hoop itself. You cannot tag in at the base. Yeah, no, so that's important. You actually have to tag in with your body. You can't tag in with the broom itself. If anybody's ever watched Teddy Costa play this game, he knows he likes. They know he likes to do that. So keep an eye out for him. He knows I won't be happy I'm telling you that, but make sure you tag in with your actual hand. Next, and this is really important, you have to remount while still in the vicinity of the hoops. That means you can't tag in and take 3 steps towards a bludger on the ground and then remember to put your broom in there. You have to, as soon as you tag in, immediately get it back in there, and then finally you're allowed to start playing, right? And those 3 things need to happen in that order, right? You can't tag in, then take your broom out and put it back in, right? It has to be out, make the tag, put it back in.
So once I get beat and I dismount, I can kind of like screen the opposing players from other balls in the field, right?
Yeah, so no, that's not. Yeah, so again, that's that before playing again part. It's actually before interacting in any way with other players or balls, right? You must actively avoid any interactions with other players while you are taking care of the knockout procedure, right? That means you can't block the path of a beater running for a ball. You can't block the path of a chaser running to try and make a goal. Until you have completely remounted, you should not be making any play on any ball or any player, straight up. And to your point, ignoring this should be adjudicated in one of 2 ways, right? If it can quickly be adjudicated with a repeat and it doesn't affect, and you can just do a quick turnover without needing to stop playing, do that, right? Do the repeat. Also, often the first time someone messes this up, maybe even the second time, if it's not affecting play, you'll give them that chance to repeat the knockout procedure. However, if it substantially affects play, you feel they intentionally are affecting play or like trying to like guard their ball while tagging in, things like that, that's where it becomes a yellow card foul, right? And this is super, super important in the beating game specifically, because many times, especially in USQ right now, beaters like to hide by their hoops and kind of chill back there so that when they're beat, they can do a quick tag and grab their ball again. When that's happening, they cannot be making any play for the ball on the ground until they've completely remounted. If you're seeing that occur, you need to immediately stop them, make them redo it, and adjudicate that turnover.
Now, safe calls. So is this like a phone call from a safe? What's this?
Not quite. So this is going to be when a beater is hit by a live bludger. Kind of talked about it a little bit on the previous slide. If that bludger was made live by their own team, they're safe. Can't be beat by a bludger from your own teammate, right? Maybe that bludger hit off a chaser on the other team and then bounced off them into you. That doesn't mean you're beat either, right? If the beater who originally made a bludger live, right? If that ball hits you at any time before it becomes dead and you're on their team, you're not beat, right? But it can be very tough for you to understand that if you're not watching specifically everything that's going on. And as a chaser, you often won't because you need to focus on the quaffle. In those situations, you should still be, if you don't know it came from your own team, dismounting and taking care of that knockout procedure. And then the ref should be very quickly, very clearly, very loudly calling a safe call and letting you know you can remount, right? As a ref, it's really, really important anytime you see somebody get hit by a dodgeball, whether they immediately start taking that knockout procedure or not, if they are not actually beat, whether it's because it was a late beat, and we'll go into a little bit later what that means, or it was a friendly fire beat, you need to make that safe call super, super clearly. And if they dismounted, tell them they can remount.
All right. So, here we go. Natural motion, exactly what we were just talking about.
Yeah, so there is a concept called natural motion, and I've kind of broken this up into 3 slides. One for contact, one for passing and shooting, and I think one just for balls in general. But first one we'll go over is contact, right? So this ties into kind of that safe, or the reckless play mentality, reckless to dangerous play mentality. But anytime you are hit by a dodgeball, right? Anytime you are beat or struck, right? As a beater, maybe you're not technically beat yet or knocked out, you're struck at this point. But as soon as you are hit by that live dodgeball, you need to immediately act to cease all contact with opposing players, right? So sometimes you might have been like about to hit someone, right? You're maybe like about to take that step and wrap. I get it. Sometimes it happens. The way it works, the way the rule book is very clearly stated, is if you need to take multiple steps after being struck to make your contact, that contact is illegal, right? You're given a single step and maybe whatever like initial hit you were going to make, and then you're 100% your responsibility to stop, right? So if you're getting hit by a dodgeball and taking 2 or 3 or 4 steps before you actually make contact with somebody, 100% illegal, 100% should not be doing that. You will be getting a yellow card for that, or at least you should. Next step, let's say you actually were in the middle of actually wrapping somebody or you're hitting somebody when you get hit. You need to, again, immediately act to cease that motion, right? So the moment that bludger touches you, you need to try and let go. So that doesn't mean the moment you hear someone say you're beat, you let go. It's the moment it touches you, you let go. So if you get drilled square in the back, it is very reasonable for everybody to know you were beat, you know you got beat. You should not be continuing taking that wrapping that player to the ground, waiting for a beat call. You should be immediately letting go and letting that player continue to play. It's simple, right? And again, for that penalty for everybody, right? It's illegal contact while knocked out. Intention is not relevant here, right? Just like even if you think the player, right? So what we were just discussing was players continually intentionally doing it because they were waiting for a beat call. On the flip side, maybe they weren't intentionally doing it. They just didn't have good control of their body. Maybe they were a little bit just like completely committing to a tackle and not really caring if they got beat or not. That's just as much on them, right? You're expected to be in control of your own body at all times. We're playing a contact sport. You need to treat others' safety as a priority here. So if you make illegal contact while knocked out and affects play in any way, or it was deemed to have you not took immediate action to cease that contact, you get that yellow.
All right, so natural motion throwing.
Yep. So here's section 2 of natural motion, right? Plenty of times, right? Players got a quaffle, players got a bludger, right? They're doing things, they're winding up to send the ball going, and before they let go of it, get hit with a dodgeball, right? That's going to have implications. So first up, we'll kind of talk about the overall concept of what counts as natural motion, what you're allowed to finish, right? So the way the rulebook works is natural motion can only be completed if it cannot be reasonably stopped, right? And that's important because that means if someone's got the ball cocked up behind their head, right, just waiting to get beat and then are going to just kind of start their motion as soon as the ball hits them and then finish a full-on throw, that's not legal, right? That's actually an immediate turnover. You're just kind of waiting there baiting for it just to tap you and then do your entire motion afterwards. It's very reasonable for you to have stopped that motion, right? So we're going to have to call a turnover there. If, on the other hand, someone's behind you, you can't see them, you're in the middle of a throw, it hits you in the back, you finish your throw, that's going to be that natural motion that's reasonable. That's going to be allowed to finish. Very important to note, the natural motion is only legal and allowed if the player is in contact with the ball when they are beat, right? So when they are struck by the dodgeball. That means if you're in the motion of a kick, right, even if you're like an inch away from the ball, you're at the very end of your kicking motion. If you get struck by a dodgeball before you make contact with that ball on the ground, it doesn't matter that you were in your natural motion, you couldn't stop, that ball should be turned over immediately, right? You need to have already been touching the ball to be awarded the right of natural motion when throwing or kicking or otherwise propelling the ball.
Right, and a common occurrence here that I see is someone will jump up for like an alley-oop or to catch a pass, and they'll get beat before the ball arrives, and then they'll like catch and throw it to someone else. Or they'll just swat it out of the air to someone else. And
a really good one.
Just because your natural motion is you were jumping, that doesn't mean that it now extends to anything you do while you're in the air.
100%. The other one I see a lot is quaffle players, they're the offense kind of degenerated and the ball's on the ground, so they're running over to try and kick it back to their own side for a reset. Unless they actually make contact with that quaffle in their motion before they're getting hit, doesn't matter how close to completing it they were, that ball gets turned over. Unintentional natural motion violations, so the two that we were kind of just talking about, where it's like the last second, you're in the air or you're trying to kick it, or even if you're kind of you were cogging it back, but like you thought you got it off in time, that unintentional natural motion violation is just going to be a turnover. No need to stop play, no need to give over a card or anything like that. On the flip side, you think someone is intentionally violating natural motion, right? That's going to be a yellow card.
And then the last element of your natural motion. So natural motion with the balls. So what does natural
Yeah.
motion mean for each type of ball in the field?
For sure. So, assuming that the actual natural motion is allowed, right? Assuming it was legal natural motion. There are two different scenarios, right? There's the quaffle in natural motion and a bludger in natural motion. We'll go over the quaffle first. So, a quaffle is considered unscorable if it was thrown during natural motion by a beat player, right? So, chasers or a keeper on offense, they're trying to take a shot. They get beat before that ball leaves their hand. While that ball is still live, it is unscorable, right? So that means when they let it go, you don't have to do a turnover or anything. You let the ball go where it may. But if it goes through a hoop, there is no goal, right? The only way for that ball to become scorable again is for a player on the same team as the thrower to possess it.
Now, natural motion with bludgers. As someone who has played against you and with Max Havlin and Lulu, I've seen quite a bit of natural motion and sketchy amounts of natural motion with bludger.
Yeah, that's fair. So again, right, what we talked about in the previous slide is really, really important, right? That motion needs to have been completely started and cannot reasonably be stopped after being struck and before it leaves your hand, right? So if those things are true, then the bludger is being propelled by natural motion. That being said, any bludger propelled by natural motion is dead, right? It cannot beat anybody. It cannot incur the knockout effect on any player of any team. It is 100% dead, and it's really important we recognize that, right? A lot of times, some experienced refs will go, oh, no, it was natural motion, it's fine. It's like, no, there's really not much as far as allowed to occur with natural motion as it comes to bludgers, right?
So up next is, if I don't want to get beat, what are my options?
Yeah, so two options, generally speaking, right? Blocking and batting. So all players can block, right? If they're holding a ball, right? To be clear, it needs to be a live or an in-play ball. So specifically for chasers, if you've picked up a quaffle after a goal and it hasn't been made live by your keeper, you cannot block with that ball. I don't think that rule really comes up much, but because it doesn't come up much, I think it's kind of unknown by a lot of people. So important to note, you can't actually block with that quaffle until it's been made live by a keeper. The way blocking works, whether it's with a quaffle or a dodgeball, is if a beater on the other team throws a ball at you and you're holding a ball, you're in possession of a ball, specifically a live ball, like not dead, you are allowed to use that ball and only that ball to kind of hit that bludger coming at you away, right? And you can just sit still and block it, or you can actively impart a force to send that ball flying wherever you want, right? Important to note, you can only do this with balls being sent at you from the other team, right? So if my beating partner has a dodgeball and they throw it towards me, I can't then smack that live ball with the bludger in my hand at a beater on the other team, or just with my own hand, right? That is illegal. It's an illegal batting. You can't do that. You can, and I want to stress this, you can send that bludger flying anywhere, right? So if someone tries to make a beat on you and you just bat the hell out of it and send it off pitch, that is legal, right? That was a live ball and you are blocking it. You are allowed to send it flying wherever you want. Again, just going over the penalty, anytime you're doing that illegal bat or an illegal block, that will be a blue card.
So we're just talking about batting, but now swatting, and this is going to be USQ specific because MLQ lets chasers swat. But
yep,
when it comes to beater swatting, it's the same in both leagues. So what are you allowed to do if you don't have a bludger and you want to send the ball somewhere else?
Yeah. So first up, I want to make it clear that you touched on something there. If you don't have a bludger, you're allowed to swat. If you do have a bludger, you are not allowed to swat an incoming bludger, right? No matter what. Doesn't matter what point of contact it is. If you currently have control, you cannot swat a bludger coming at you. However, if you don't have a ball, bludger's coming flying at you, what is a swat? So a swat is the very first point of contact your body makes with that incoming live bludger. It can be made with your head, your hand, your foot, your butt, doesn't matter, right? It's whatever that first point of contact with an incoming live bludger is your swatting motion, right? And what you're allowed to do with that swat is redirect the bludger in any direction, right? Using any part of your body, you can just send it flying some other direction. It is really important to note it is only that initial point of contact though, right? So let's say dodgeball's coming flying at me and hits me in the shoulder and kind of bounces up a little bit. I can't then swat the ball away with my second point of contact, right? It has to be that first. I could have shouldered it somewhere, but as soon as it's hit my shoulder, I can't then swat the ball. To Chris's point, chasers and keepers are allowed to swat in MLQ. The same concept applies to them. Also, kind of important for this, for USQ rules, very frequently you'll see chasers, they like to kind of turn their body or avoid things like that to kind of try and, air quotes, dodge a beat attempt. If they're doing that with the clear intention to propel the dodgeball coming at them in some other way, and their actions could not reasonably be interpreted to be doing anything else besides that, that is also an illegal swat with that first point of contact, right? You'll see it a lot. I'm going to call out Harry. I've played with him plenty of times. He's going to turn a little bit and hit it with his broom as it's hitting him. No good, right? If what you as a chaser is doing is intentionally using your body to redirect that dodgeball in some way, and you're not doing anything else, right? You're not actively running to make a hit or something like that. You're just standing there trying to switch the position of that dodgeball. That is illegal swatting.
And I think this is a good time to point out the difference between incidental and accidental contact. So incidental contact is, for the most part, is no harm, no foul. You just let it go. But accidental, you're not off the hook just because what you did was an accident. The blue card for illegal bludger swat isn't intentional illegal bludger swat. It's just illegal bludger swat.
100%. Right?
So if your bludger swat affects the beater's ability to continue to play and support their team, it doesn't really matter whether you meant to do it or not.
Yeah, that's a really good call out, and definitely something I think beat refs need to watch a little bit more for.
For sure.
Because there are quite a few chasers who are trying to get squirrely and do some kind of random spin or move or whatnot to try and make it move a little bit and make it look like it was an accident, or maybe it was an accident. Doesn't matter. If it affects that play, it is a swat and needs to get that blue card.
Next up, all right, so claiming immunity is one of the more convoluted. This and third bludger interference are some of the most convoluted parts of the rulebook that are hard to follow. So please, Mario, give us your wisdom. Summer, what is it? How does this work?
All right, so first up, and you touched on it, right? This ties very clearly into third bludger and third bludger manipulation, but for a team to claim immunity, what needs to occur is the other team needs to possess both bludgers, and the third bludger must be dead. And it's really important that "and the third bludger must be dead" part, right? If the other team has two bludgers and I have a bludger, and I go to just do a tap beat on a chaser, I cannot claim immunity as soon as that ball's out of my hand. I have to wait for that ball to hit the ground before I can claim immunity, right? It has to be dead before me or my teammate can claim immunity, right? In addition, only one of us on my team can claim immunity once that ball has become dead, right? You can't both put your fist up. You have to just be one person.
Right. And one thing I do want to point out, your second point here, was that if you don't attempt to beat someone, you can't suddenly claim immunity on your own bludger, but your teammate can claim immunity on your bludger if you do so.
Yeah,
and that's a rule I've messed up personally in the past. I think I was reffing a game with Texas, and I accidentally messed this rule up. And Texas was not thrilled about it. They had every right to not be thrilled about it. All right, so if I mess up the immunity claim, what kind of punishment am I looking down at?
Yeah, so there are a couple, and the first one is improper immunity claim, right? So that would be kind of the scenario we were just discussing, where after, let's say, they kick it, they keep their hand up, right? It's now improper for that hand to be up because they weren't making an attempt at a knockout, right? So the difference between improper and the later one that we'll go over, which is invalid, is improper means you personally could not have claimed immunity even though there is a third bludger. Invalid means you're claiming immunity when there isn't a third bludger. That's kind of the distinction between the two. Let's say you know, or you could reasonably be expected to know that there isn't a third bludger. You put your fist up anyway to run out for a ball near someone's feet, and they might not have any idea there isn't a third bludger because they're staring at you. You're now invalidly claiming an immunity and likely affecting play because it makes it look like you can't be beat. that's when play needs to be stopped and a blue card needs to be adjudicated, because you are actively affecting the play and likely intentionally doing it, or reasonably should have known you couldn't do it.
All right, great summary of immunity. That makes it a lot more clear than the rulebook does.
I hope so. There is one last thing I want to touch on it right here, and that is kind of the timing of an immunity claim, right? So oftentimes, right, you throw your ball, it hits the ground, especially during, like, let's say, stitch on pitch. There can be very small amounts of time between when a third bludger becomes a third bludger because it was just made dead and when you're claiming that immunity, right? Your fist has to be up above your shoulder before a ball has been made live by the other team for you to be immune from that beat.
All right, so after claiming immunity, once you claimed it, you can't just do whatever you want.
100%. Once you claimed it, you got a very small list of things you can do. That list is move directly towards the ball, the third bludger, and then gain possession of it. Those are the only two things you can do once you have immunity, right? You have to immediately and directly move to gain possession. So you can't slowly walk around the edge of the pitch and roundabout get to it. You can't, kind of stand still over it for a while once you get there and just kind of stand there because you don't feel like picking it up yet, right? You have to immediately go to it, and once you get to it, you have to immediately act to gain possession. Because oftentimes, beaters on the other team will kind of be waiting for you near the bludger trying to beat you. You, as a beater, do not lose immunity until you have possessed that third bludger, right? So I get over to it, my fist is up, I lower my fist because I want to reach down and grab the ball. The other team cannot start the natural motion of a beat before my immunity is lost, right? So if they start throwing as I'm reaching down, even if that ball doesn't hit me until after I have gained possession, because they started their throwing motion before I lost my immunity, it is invalid and cannot beat me. That is one of the most commonly not called, if not the most commonly miscalled call in all of beating.
And one thing here as well is if you're the immune player and you just kind of stand over the third bludger and just stare down another beater, you run the risk of losing your immunity or even earning yourself a card if you don't reach down to pick it up. But if you're worried about another beater, you can move to one side of the bludger and then decide, to kick it or pick it up from there.
100%. I usually give someone a 2-second count. Like, if they get to the ball, I'll go 1, 2. If they have not made contact at that point, if they're still standing there with the fist up, if they're not actively like winding up for a kick or bending over to grab it, game over, immunity violation. If I think they're doing it like very unintentionally, I might say back to hoops if it's not affecting anything, but most of the time it's going to be a blue card at that point. You might get a warning the first time you do it, but you really need to be strict about that. You can't just get over there and just kind of wait around, right? Has to be immediately attempting to gain that possession.
Right. And speaking of being immune till you pick up possession, no matter if you don't want to be immune, you are still immune until you get possession of the third bludger or until there is no third bludger.
Yeah, so that's also important. You cannot choose to give up your immunity. Let's say you claim immunity. Well, to be clear, you cannot choose to give up immunity unless some other rule has occurred that like the immunity claim's no longer valid, right? Like, if, let's say, the other team, throws their bludger away and now it's not the third bludger, obviously at that point you can give up your immunity. But if your immunity claim is still valid, the third bludger is still the third bludger, you need to keep your immunity claim until you gain possession. You can't run halfway there and then see your teammate is actually closer and sit them put your arm down and let them put their arm up. That's no good. As soon as you've chosen to put your arm up, you need to go. If both of you, let's say, put your arm up at right at the same time, that case, one of you is allowed to put it down because there's only one person can have it. But as soon as one person has been established to have that immunity, they must continue it until they gain possession.
And if you are violating immunity, you run the risk of earning yourself a blue card.
Correct. Yep. The penalty for any immunity violation is going to be that blue card.
So now, hand in hand with immunity is the third bludger, what used to be called guarding the third bludger, but has now been changed to TBI, or third bludger interference. So
yes.
What is a third bludger and how do I interfere with it?
Yep, so again, right, a third bludger is designated as the third bludger as soon as it is dead and the other team possesses 2 bludgers, right? So one team possesses 2 bludgers, third ball is on the ground, or another way, dead, right? It is now the third bludger. If you are one of the 2 players on the team with possession, you cannot touch that third bludger or in any way attempt to move that third bludger for as long as it remains the third bludger. You also cannot attempt to get in the way of a player claiming immunity trying to move towards it, right? So you can't body block the player with immunity. Even if you're not beating them, you can't get in their path towards that ball. The only way the third bludger ceases to be the third bludger is if the team with possession makes a reasonable beat attempt or loses their ball to the team without possession, right? Or the third bludger is actually picked up by that team without possession, right? So the first one, reasonable beat attempt. That means one of the 2 players with possession takes aim and actually throws a reasonable attempt at a player on the other team, right?
Right, and I think each ref almost has somewhat of their own yardstick for this, and I think this is something captains should ask in captains meetings.
So that was the first thing that can make a third bludger no longer, or if it's a reasonable attempt, it makes the third bludger no longer the third bludger, right? If it isn't reasonable, the beater, after making that throw, cannot go for that third bludger. They can go try and chase down their own bludger they just threw away, but they cannot try and touch that third bludger on the ground.
At that point, you're getting the TBI foul, which is not a card.
Yeah, which I really am surprised about, but it is true. All third bludger interference penalties result in a back to hoops for the player who committed the foul and a double bludger turnover. When we say double bludger turnover, that means the player who committed the foul, whatever ball they were in possession of, should be turned over, and the ball that was originally the third bludger should be turned over. Right? Pretty much every ball, other than the one that was in possession by the player on the team with possession who wasn't involved in the play, they should be able to keep their ball.
Usually play has to be stopped for this.
Yeah.
Because if they're missing on that not reasonable beat attempt, I'm going to guess, I mean, you're a beater, you can probably, correct me if I'm wrong here, they're not going to miss by a little. They're going to miss by a lot.
Yeah, someone's going to need to chase down that bludger for sure. And specifically in the beater game, right, when something like that happens, it's going to affect the play to the point where if you don't stop play and bring that ball back over, the team that was claiming immunity or was going for that third bludger is going to be seriously disadvantaged by the play that's occurring.
Right, and if and this foul is enough to negate a goal or a snitch catch.
Yeah, which is really important, right? Because they added that any turnover is enough, right, to negate a goal or a snitch catch at this point, right? Any quaffle or bludger turnover, I believe.
Yes.
So, and that's important to remember for refs in general. Anytime a ball is turned over, a quaffle or a bludger, that should negate any goals or any snitch catches that happen after that foul has occurred.
It can. I mean,
well, fair. It can. I personally think it should in the beater game every time because, quite frankly, if the beater isn't getting a chance to have a ball and make an attempt to throw and stop what's going on, you have seriously disadvantaged the team. But to your point, it is a can, not an always. There are going to be some small times where, right, like maybe there's a beater scrum at the far end of the pitch and on the opposite end someone scores. On that case, I'll probably do the turnover and not say the goal wasn't good because unless it happened, 30 or 40 seconds before the goal and they could have ran all the way back, it wouldn't have affected play. So that is a good call.
Right. Thank you so much, Mario, for joining me, creating these slides, and explaining the rules that beaters and ARs need to know. If you are craving more stories and discussion, go ahead and take a look at some of the links in the description below, and take a look at ARing 111, the extended cut. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any questions. I'll be sure to answer them in a future mailbag episode. Come back on Thursday to see the next episode in the series on the calls ARs need to make. Please travel safely, and as always, thank you for watching.